The woman dragged the pine log uphill alone. Jacob Morgan watched from his horse on the ridge. Late October wind cutting through his coat. The log was full length, heavy enough that 2 men would have cursed hauling it. She had rope over her shoulder, boots digging into rocky soil. Her faded calico dress mud-stained to the knees. Most women would have quit an hour ago. He nudged his horse down the slope. The half-built cabin came into view, walls barely chest-high, no roof, surrounded by scattered tools and cut timber. A canvas tent sagged beside it, smoke rising from a meager fire pit. She heard his approach and straightened. Breathing hard. Didn't run. Didn't call for help. Just stood there, chin up, watching him come. "Afternoon," Jacob said, dismounting. "That's a lot of cabin for one person. Don't need charity from strangers." Her voice was steady, but her hands stayed on the rope like she might need to use it as a weapon. He studied the walls. Roof won't hold without proper bracing. Storms coming in 2 weeks, maybe less. "I'll manage." Jacob looked at her, then really looked. A scar ran from her left temple to her jawline, old and pale against weathered skin. "Burns," he guessed. She read his gaze and her shoulders tightened. "I'm not pretty," she whispered, defensive, like she'd said it 100 times before. Jacob met her eyes. "That's fine. I need honest, not fancy. Winter kills pretty folk first out here." She blinked. Something shifted in her face, surprise, maybe, or suspicion of kindness. "Why would you help me?" she asked. "Because I'm tired of liars in nice dresses." He picked up her hammer, tested its weight. The handle was wrapped in cloth strips for a smaller grip. "You got nails?" She hesitated, then nodded toward a crate. "I can pay with labor. I cook. I mend." "Fair enough." He walked to the nearest wall, examined the joints. "What's your name?" "Clara Brennan." "Jacob Morgan. I run cattle 3 miles south." He glanced at the sky clouds thickening, light fading. "We start tomorrow at first light." Clara watched him ride away until he disappeared into the pines. Then she sat down hard on a stump, hands shaking. First snow in 2 weeks. First hope in 6 months. She wasn't sure which scared her more. Jacob crouched by Clara's fire the next afternoon, examining her tools while she boiled coffee in a dented pot. The hammer handle, the sorted nails, the careful stacks of lumber, everything spoke of someone who planned, who thought ahead. "You do good work," he said. "Taught myself." She handed him a tin cup. "After my husband died," he sipped the coffee strong and bitter, cowboy style. "Town's got a lot of widows. Why buy land out here alone?" Clara's jaw tightened. "Merchant in town wanted me after Thomas passed. Said I needed a man's protection. When I refused..." She stared into the fire. Rumors started. Cursed woman. Witch who burned her own house down. Jacob said nothing, waiting. Fire started during a fight. She continued. Voice flat. Lamp broke. I tried to pull him out. He hit me into the flames. I got free. He didn't. She touched her scar unconsciously. Town buried him a hero. Buried me alive with gossip. So you bought this claim. With everything I had left. Figured if I'm going to be alone, might as well be on my own terms. She looked at him directly. What about you, ranch that size? You should have a wife. Sons. Even... Jacob set down his cup. Had a wife. Sarah. Beautiful woman. Everyone loved her. She wanted town life parties. Dances. People admiring her. Ranch bored her. He paused. She died 2 years back. Childbirth. Baby didn't make it either. I'm sorry. Don't be. I loved her. But I didn't like her much toward the end. She didn't like me either, truth be told. He stood, brushed off his pants. Town widows circle me now like buzzards. All performance. No help. I'm drowning in women who want to be Mrs. Morgan but don't want to be my partner. Clara stood too, studying him with new understanding. So this arrangement is practical. Jacob finished. You need help before winter. I need meals and mending. Nobody needs to make it more complicated. Agreed. They shook hands. Her grip matched his, calloused, firm, honest. He noticed she didn't look away. We'll start on the roof frame tomorrow, he said, as he rode off. Clara watched until the trees swallowed him. Then she turned back to her half-built cabin, something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Hope was dangerous, but maybe, this once, it was worth the risk. 1 week later, snow began to fall. Clara measured a board while Jacob sawed, their breath fogging in the cold November air. The cabin walls were complete now, the roof frame half finished. They worked in efficient silence, a rhythm developed through days of shared labor. Hold this steady, Jacob said. Lifting a beam, she braced it while he hammered. Snow dusted their shoulders, melting against their necks. Thomas used to drink, Clara said suddenly. Started after we lost our first baby. Got mean when he drank. Jacob kept hammering but listened. That night, he came home drunk. Started yelling about supper being cold, about me being useless. Knocked the lamp over during the fight. She stared at the beam she was holding. I tried to save him. Even after everything, I tried. But the fire... She shook her head. Town decided I must have wanted him dead. Easier to blame the scarred woman than admit their church deacon beat his wife. Jacob set down the hammer. My wife wanted everything I couldn't give her. Status. Excitement. I knew she was unhappy, but I kept hoping the ranch would be enough. He looked at the mountains. When she died. My first thought was, I'm free. Been hating myself for that ever since. Maybe God gives us what we can't keep so we learn what we actually need. Clara said quietly. Maybe. Jacob picked up his hammer again. Or maybe God's just quieter than preachers claim. The snow intensified, suddenly thick flakes, wind picking up. Jacob squinted at the sky. We need to stop. This is turning into a blizzard. You should go before it gets worse. Too late for that. He secured the tarp over the unfinished roof. I'm staying the night. Clara's face went carefully blank. There's only one blanket. We'll manage. By nightfall. The storm howled outside. They sat by the fire inside the half-finished cabin, canvas tarp overhead, sharing Clara's blanket around their shoulders. Not touching, but close enough to feel each other's warmth. Clara pulled a book from her pack, water-stained but intact. Do you read barely? Jacob admitted. Never had much schooling? I could teach you, if you want. I'd like that. She opened to a marked page and began reading aloud Homer's Odyssey. Penelope waiting for Odysseus. Her voice was soft but clear, turning ancient words into something alive. Jacob listened like a man starving, somewhere around midnight, exhausted. Clara's head drooped against his shoulder. He went very still, afraid to wake her, afraid to move. At dawn. She stirred and realized where she was. Their eyes met. Neither spoke. Neither pulled away. Then Jacob looked through the doorway, just a frame. No door yet, and his face hardened. What? Clara asked. Horse tracks in the snow, fresh ones. Someone circled the cabin during the storm. They stood together in the doorway. In the distance, riders approached 3 men, led by Preacher Whitmore. Jacob moved beside Clara, close enough that his presence made a statement. The town had come calling. 2 weeks later, the cabin was nearly complete. Door hung, windows sealed, chimney drawing smoke properly. Clara plastered the gaps between logs while Jacob fitted shutters outside. She heard him humming the first music this silent place had known. They'd found a rhythm. She anticipated his needs. He read her exhaustion without asking. Conversations deepened beyond survival. "You mentioned reading," Jacob said during their noon break. "What else you got?" Clara produced 3 more books from her trunk. Shakespeare, Whitman, a worn Bible. "These survived the fire. Everything else burned. Read to me again tonight. If you'll help me understand your cattle accounts, I'm good with numbers." A messenger arrived that afternoon with supplies from town. The boy wouldn't meet Clara's eyes, just dropped the crates and left. A note was pinned to the flour sack. Jacob opened it, face darkening. "Offer still stands. Honest work for honest woman. Leave the arrangement." Pritchard." "Pritchard's the merchant," Clara said quietly. "The one who wanted me." Jacob crumpled the note. "I'm riding to town." "No." Clara caught his arm. "Let them talk. These walls don't care about gossip." That evening, she read the Odyssey aloud by firelight, voicing Penelope's suitors in pompous tones that made Jacob laugh deep. Genuine, surprised by the sound of his own joy. Clara stopped mid-sentence, stunned. "What?" he asked. "I haven't heard laughter in this place. Not since I arrived." "Me neither. Not in 2 years." They looked at each other across the fire, something unspoken passing between them. Then Clara smiled small, real, and kept reading. Outside, hidden in the tree line, a figure watched through the window. Pritchard's ranch hand, taking notes for his employer. The storm was coming, but not the kind you could shelter from with walls. The blizzard hit mid-December with 3 days' fury. Clara and Jacob were trapped inside, wind howling so loud they had to raise their voices to be heard. But the cabin held. Every joint, every beam, every nail they'd driven together, it all held. "Your work's good," Clara said, watching the walls. "Our work," Jacob corrected. They fell into domestic rhythm. She read aloud for hours. He listened, mending tack, learning words by listening. He taught her to braid rope properly. Their hands touched, and she didn't flinch. The second night, she woke screaming. "Clara." Jacob was across the room instantly, hands visible, non-threatening. "You're safe. You're here." The fire's banked. She was shaking, sweat-soaked despite the cold. "I dreamed I was burning again. Thomas was holding me down. He's gone. He can't hurt you. But I'm still afraid." Her voice broke. "I hate that I'm still afraid to be touched, to trust anyone close to me." Jacob sat on the floor beside her bedroll, careful to keep distance. "When Sarah died, my first thought was relief. That makes me a coward. Doesn't it? It makes you human." "I haven't touched another person beyond handshakes in 2 years, he admitted. Scared of what it might mean, scared I'd mess it up again. They sat in silence. 2 damaged people learning they weren't alone. The third night, exhausted from tension, Clara fell asleep against his shoulder while he read haltingly from her book he was learning. Slowly, he didn't move until dawn, afraid to break whatever fragile thing was growing between them. She woke, realized where she was, met his eyes. "I'm sorry," she started. "Don't be. You smell like pine smoke," she murmured, half asleep still. "And safety." "You feel like home," he whispered back. Morning broke clear and bright. The storm had passed. They separated awkwardly, both knowing they'd crossed a line neither could name. Jacob stepped outside to check the chimney and froze. Fresh horse tracks circled the cabin in the snow. Someone had watched them during the storm, close enough to see through the windows. Their privacy had always been an illusion. The week before Christmas, Clara insisted on accompanying Jacob to town for supplies. "I'm tired of hiding," she said. "Town's not kind to you. Then they can be unkind to my face." Elkridge was 20 miles south, a collection of wooden buildings around a church and general store. They arrived Sunday morning just as services let out. Clara walked beside Jacob down Main Street. Chin up, scar visible in cold sunlight. Conversation stopped. Women clutched children away. Men stared with contempt or unwanted interest. Preacher Whitmore blocked the mercantile steps, flanked by Amos Pritchard and 3 church elders. "Brother Morgan," the preacher's voice carried, "this woman is known for sin. You defile her and yourself with this arrangement." People gathered, forming a crowd. Pritchard stepped forward, oily smile in place. "Clara, my offer stands. Honest work at my boarding house. Save both your reputations and this." The trap closed around them: public accusation, social pressure, the weight of judgment. Jacob felt panic rise, the old instinct to avoid scandal, to protect his name. Sarah had cared so much about appearance. He'd spent years enabling that lie. "It's just work." He heard himself say, "The cabin's nearly done." The words hung in frozen air. Clara went rigid beside him. Just work. He'd reduced everything: the shared nights, the laughter, the trust they'd built to labor, made her nothing again. "See," Pritchard's smile widened, "even he knows you're not worth defending. Clara." She turned and walked to the wagon without a word. The silent ride home lasted forever. At her cabin, she climbed down, spoke without looking at him. "Don't come back. The cabin's finished. Our contract's done." She closed the door he'd hung in his face. Jacob sat in the wagon, snow beginning to fall again, and understood exactly what he'd done. He'd chosen reputation over truth, just like before. And this time, he'd destroyed something real. Christmas week arrived cold and clear. Jacob sat alone in his ranch house, whiskey bottle on the table, staring through frost-glazed windows at his wife's grave on the hill. The house was warm, well-built, empty as a church on Monday. He'd done it again. Chosen appearance over honesty, cowardice over courage. Clara had offered him truth rough, scarred. Real truth, and he'd called it just work, to save face in front of people whose opinions meant nothing. The bottle sat untouched. Drinking wouldn't fix this. 3 miles away, Clara worked alone in lamplight, finishing the final details: barn door, garden fence, small repairs. Her hands moved automatically, but her mind was numb. She should have known better than to hope. Men always disappointed, even good ones. Especially good ones, because their betrayals hurt worse. Christmas morning. She woke to find something on her doorstep: wildflowers, frozen in ice like preserved memories. No note, just flowers. She carried them inside and wept. That afternoon, old Samuel Reed rode up to Jacob's ranch. Samuel was 70, weathered as saddle leather. The man who'd taught Jacob everything about ranching. "You look like hell," Samuel said, not dismounting. "Feel worse." "Good. That woman built more with broken hands than most men manage with whole ones." Samuel's voice was harsh. "Your wife wanted pretty. This one wants real. You gonna let fear win twice? What if she won't forgive me? Then you earned it. But you still gotta try, or die alone in that cold bed you're making." Samuel rode off, leaving Jacob standing in his empty yard. He looked at Sarah's grave on the hill. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Sorry I couldn't be what you needed. Sorry I couldn't love you the way you wanted." He took a breath. "But I'm done apologizing for wanting something real." He saddled his horse and rode to town. Sunday morning, Jacob Morgan stood before the packed church, hat in his hands. "I'm here to confess," he said, "and to set some things right about Clara Brennan." Clara was on the roof when she heard hoofbeats. She'd been hammering the final shingles, determined to finish everything alone. When Jacob appeared below, she didn't stop working, didn't acknowledge him. He dismounted, picked up the spare hammer, and climbed the ladder without asking permission. They worked side by side in silence for an hour. The roof was completed under their joint effort, the last piece of the cabin they'd built together. sitting on the ridgeline, breathing hard. Jacob finally spoke. I stood in front of the whole congregation this morning, told them everything. He stared at the mountains. Told them about my cowardice, about calling us just work, when you're the realest thing I've known in years. Told them you're worth 10 of their so-called decent folk. Clara said nothing, waiting. I said if they wanted to judge someone, judge me. You built a life from ash while they threw stones. He turned to face her. I'm not good with words. Clara. Got that proven Sunday last. But I'm good with my hands, and I'm trying to be good with my heart. What are you asking? Jacob, let me build a life with you. Not pretty, not fancy, just honest. She studied him gray-streaked hair, weathered face, earnest eyes that finally saw her clearly. I don't need rescuing, she said slowly. Never did. I know. But I wouldn't mind a partner. Equal share, equal say. Jacob extended his hand. Deal. This time when they shook. He pulled her close, asking permission with his eyes first. She nodded. Their first kiss was gentle, terrified, perfect. A sound made them look up. On the horizon. Dust rose wagons approaching. What's that? Clara asked. Town families. After my sermon, some folks felt ashamed. They're bringing lumber, tools, food. Jacob smiled slightly. They want to help build your barn. Our barn, Clara corrected. They climbed down as the first wagon arrived, families with children, men with tools, women with food baskets. Preacher Whitmore came, awkward and apologetic. Even Pritchard slunk past, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The community that had judged them came to rebuild. Clara stood beside Jacob, watching them work, and felt something she'd thought was lost forever. She belonged somewhere again. Late March brought the first true spring day. Clara woke in the finished cabin. Sunlight streaming through windows Jacob had fitted perfectly. He was asleep in the chair by the banked fire he rode home most nights, courting properly, respecting her need for time and space. She watched him sleep. This man who'd chosen truth over ease, partnership over appearance. His face was peaceful in ways it hadn't been last fall. He stirred, met her eyes, smiled. Morning. Morning. They cooked breakfast together, eggs from her new chickens, bread she'd baked, coffee he'd brought from town, easy partnership, comfortable silence, outside. The garden plot waited. They spent the morning planting carrots, beans, potatoes, wildflowers at the edges because Clara wanted color. Their hands worked the soil together, planning harvest, building future. A rider approached around noon. Pritchard, hat in hand. Miss Brennan, Mr. Morgan. He cleared his throat. I came to apologize. I misjudged. You didn't misjudge. Clara interrupted calmly. You couldn't see past surfaces. Simple as that. I hope there's no hard feelings. There aren't. But there's no business either. Good day, Mr. Pritchard. He left, dismissed without anger, without power to hurt them anymore. Evening came soft and golden. They sat on the porch. Jacob had built her a bench, watching mountains turn purple in fading light. Marry me, Jacob said quietly. When you're ready. Could be tomorrow. Could be years. I'm not going anywhere. Clara took his hand. Ask me when the wildflowers bloom full. I want to say yes when the world's alive again. Deal. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the first stars appear. The cabin stood solid behind them, every beam, every nail, every moment of shared work visible in its walls. The barn rose beside it. The garden held seeds of future harvests. You know, Jacob said, you're beautiful. Clara touched her scar, smiling slightly. I'm scarred. Same thing, way I see it. Shows you fought and won. Night fell completely. Firelight glowing warm through the cabin windows. In the meadow, early wildflowers dotted the grass small, determined, reaching towards spring. Pretty fades like summer paint, fancy breaks under winter wind, but honest builds a life that holds. In that holding, broken things don't just mend, they become something stronger. And when spring comes, as it always does, love built through labor blooms deeper than any flower ever could. The mountains watched over them, ancient and patient, as the cowboy and the scarred woman sat together on their porch, building tomorrow, one quiet moment at a time. The end.